Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm one of the cooking technology experts from Kitchen Things, and we're here today to learn about cooking technology with Smeg. Now, Smeg is an Italian brand of appliance, and they are based in the northern part of Italy, in the food bowl. They are also in the area where there's a great deal of technology, near places like Parma and areas like that, where a lot of the cars, Ferrari and fancy cars and great technology come from, as well as areas like Bologna and Parma where great food comes from. So they're all into style, but with the basis of good food. Now, we're going to talk about a whole range of technology today, and I'm going to start with the newest and most exciting parts of the Smeg range with these two appliances over here. Now, this here is the worst name appliance that Smeg has ever put out. It's called a blast chiller. We are actually using it as its name describes today because I've made some ice cream that I'm going to pop in here to have with our dessert. But actually, as an appliance, it's not just a blast chiller. So I've just made some no-churn ice cream here. Now this would take about 6 hours to freeze in a regular freezer, but I'm going to pop it in here and set it going. And all things going well, this should be ice cream by the time we've finished talking today. The blast chiller itself, yes, it can chill. It is very cold, it goes down to minus 35 degrees, but it also goes up to positive 75 degrees, which means not only can it very quickly cool food, but it can also slowly cook food. So you have that ability to do slow cooking in this oven as well, particularly great with cuts of meat, like beef and roast meats. Using the temperature probe, it will slowly bring that meat up to temperature, giving a sort of faux sous vide effect to your meat. So it's excellent in that regard as well. The other benefit of it is that it runs in cycles that are automatic. So what happens is that if you set it to do a certain task, for instance, if you set it to defrost, because it can go into a positive temperature range, it's really great at defrosting. At the end of the defrost process, it will automatically revert to fridge temperature. So your food isn't sitting in an unsafe environment when it's defrosted. Again, if you want to bring a cooked dish up to temperature to eat, you can put it in the morning, and the appliance will remain as a fridge until such time as it needs to turn on to reheat your food, and then it will retain it heated at a safe temperature until you get home.
Lauren,
Yes.
does the temperature probe freeze?
You don't use the temperature probe when you're freezing food, but you use it when you're chilling food. So if you've cooked some meals, now I don't know if you're like me, but I'm used to having a big family at home, and now I only have 2 or 3 of us at home, and I still sort of cook for 6 or 7 people, and I have these leftovers. Now what's happening with those leftovers is that I need to sit them on the bench to cool down before I can pack them away into containers. And of course, while they're sitting on the bench, that's at the worst possible temperature for food safety. So bacteria thrives at room temperature, basically, and slightly above room temperature. So that means that every time we are packing away leftovers into the fridge, we're risking contamination. Because this is a blast chiller, we can put our food hot in there, use the temperature probe, and it will automatically detect when the food has got to 3 degrees, so it's food safe, and then you can pick it. Yeah, so it's a really, really versatile appliance. It's excellent. And used and combined with this, which is a vacuum chamber, you can very easily prepare a lot of foods in advance, safely vacuum them. So temperature and bacteria is one enemy of food. The other enemy is oxygen. So oxygen also deteriorates food. By vacuum sealing it, we can remove the oxygen using the blast chiller as well, and so we can actually have safe food in our fridge for up to 10 days, whereas normally we would only been able to leave it a couple of days in the fridge without.
Does that reduce freezer burn as well?
Absolutely. So no oxygen, no freezer burn. So there really isn't, they haven't detected a safe end point. So if you've vacuum sealed food and freeze it, it's pretty much good forever as long as that oxygen doesn't get in, as long as the bag isn't deteriorated. So it's very good for food saving.
So should you use special bags as well?
So it does come with some bags, and you can buy bags from us as well. They are a stock item that you can buy. They're quite easy to use and quite inexpensive.
So what the difference between it on bench kind of?
So I learnt this one by experience. So at home, unfortunately, I don't have one of these. I have a on-bench vacuum sealer. Well, actually, vacuum's not quite the right word because it should be called a suction sealer. All it does is suck the air out of the bag. Now, if you've got any liquid in your bag, what happens is the liquid goes into the machine that's sucking it out and kills it. Because this doesn't work with suction, it works with pressure. So it works with air pressure to produce a vacuum that removes the air. It can retain the liquid inside. So it's really good for things like what we're going to do now, which is we're going to vacuum seal some pears in some syrup. I've got some syrup in here to create some poached pears. Now, if I was cooking poached pears on the stovetop, I would need a whole saucepan full of the liquid. So I've got some wine in here, and you can see there's not a great deal. I don't only have to use a cup or a cup and a half of liquid for my pears. Here I would have to use a whole bottle. What a waste that is, because they've got to be sitting there for hours poaching. What happens in a vacuum is that there is a compression and a decompression. So there's a compression which compresses the air out of the bag, and then it actually does the opposite when it stops. So if you blow into the bag, it creates that decompression, and then when the air comes out, it compresses again. This is going to happen with our pears. So these pears, they're porous. So I'm going to pop the pear into the bag and then put the liquid in, and what's going to happen is when that pressurizes, the juice from the pears is going to be extracted, a bit like if you think about a sponge. So if you have a sponge and you lay it on a plate of water, it takes quite a long time for that sponge to soak up the water. But if you compress the sponge, squeeze the sponge and let it go, when it decompresses, it sucks that water up much quickly, and that's what's happening in your vacuum drawer. So we're going to pop this liquid into here, and we're going to vacuum it. Now, Smeg vacuum drawers have an extra feature that many of the other vacuum drawers don't have. It has what's called a chef's mode, and what that's going to do is repeatedly do that compression and decompression. And so that's going to force the juice from the pear out and the liquid around it in. And so what you'll see when it's finished is the pear almost looks like it's cooked, because when you cook the pear, it does that swapping over. This is going to happen without cooking the pear. So if you wanted a saffron wine infused pear that was raw, you could have that. We are actually going to cook it in the steam oven after we've finished. Now, this is quite a long process, so we're going to let it do its thing while I carry on.
Could you vacuum seal that like a day so?
Yes, absolutely. So you could do this in advance. While that's happening, that's probably going to take about 6 minutes because it's going to repeatedly compress and decompress, and I'll show you the result when we're finished. We'll move on to some of the other features of Smeg and let that carry on. So, now, Smeg ovens have a great unique capability, and that is, if you can see in here, I've got a pizza stone directly on the base of the oven, and that's because, I don't know whether you can see in here, they have a profile on the base of the oven that isn't completely flat, and this is designed for that pizza stone. It means that though there's still air flowing between the stone and the base of the oven, so you don't get damage to either, you get direct contact with the, oh, look at my dough, it has very risen. Get direct contact with that stone, so it is constantly being replenished. That heat is constantly being replenished. The difficulty in an oven, regular oven with a pizza stone, if you any other oven brand, you have to have it on a rack. Now, it's great, it gets hot, but it takes about an hour or more to get hot. And then as soon as you put something cold on it, it's going to take a long time for it to replenish its heat. So they're sort of a bit of a failure.
Do you need to buy a specialised pizza stone, or can you just use...
No, the Smeg one is designed specifically to sit on the base of the oven. It's actually got its ridges so that it sits partially on the base of the oven. I will say that I have tried with a cheap pizza stone from a local store, and I used it and thought had worked very well once, and then it broke in half because they're not designed for the sort of heat that you'd get on the base of the oven. So I'm just going to make some very quick pizza bread here. We're just going to stretch this out. I might just put some oil on it so that I don't get sticky hands. Now, Smeg ovens are great for cooking bread. So you can imagine, great for pizza, great for bread. And I'm going to talk to you about steam in a minute as well. We're just going to stretch this out so we don't overwork the dough too much. And that's a really lovely garlic oil that I've put on there. I can smell it. We'll just make a little Parmesan pizza bread here. Now, because that stone is on the base of the oven, because it's hot, and because it's replenishing its heat really quickly, it means that we can get this pizza bread done in about 5 minutes, or maybe even less.
Why did you get the dough out of the oven?
So I had the oven comes with a dough proving function. It's a great function, particularly in a Smeg oven. Many oven brands have a dough proving function, but because of one of the technologies that Smeg has, which is called thermoseal, it retains all of the moisture inside the oven. So when you shut the door, the air that's inside the oven is still inside the oven when you open the door to take the food out. There's no passing of air, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a few minutes. So because it's a really moist environment, the dough proving function is really excellent. It's a fast proving function, so we can have our dough proven very quickly. Now, I'm going to put this in. I've got my oven fairly hot, 260. It actually goes to 280 degrees. Because this is a sticky dough, I'm going to transfer it onto the stone. Because this is an oven, it's not a pizza oven with a fire or anything like that, I can transfer the dough on with the baking paper. And then after a couple of minutes, I can retrieve that baking paper to finish off the dough, finish off the pizza on the base. But we really do get a super result very quickly with great rise, because that heat from the bottom is really helping. So I'm using what's called fan-assisted static. So fan-assisted static is what Smeg calls this function. This function is ideal for this. It's using the top element and the bottom element, and the fan is circulating the heat within that oven. Now that in an older fashioned oven, ovens that we might have been used to using in the last 10 or 15 years, would have been called fan bake. Most European ovens don't have fan bake anymore actually, because they feel it's been superseded by fan forced. And fan forced function is a great function, but it's not providing browning top and bottom. So Smeg retains the fan assisted function, which is really useful for pizza, really useful for single layer baking pies and things like that. And they also have another function that is unique to Smeg as well, and that is fan forced heat combined with the top and bottom, so even more. It's like a turbo, quad turbo, or supercook depending on the model. Excellent for multiple layers with browning, which is pretty much your kiwi roast function, and that's really what I would call it. So you can see our pizza rising really well here, and our cheese is melting. I'm going to pop in and whip out that baking paper now, because the base of the pizza will have set, and then we'll leave it for another couple of minutes to brown. So you can see, really easy to remove at that point.
Is that because the base is, as you said, pretty much set?
Set already, because that heat from the stone. And what you'll find is that when I take it out and show you, you get a beautiful crispy base on any pizza that you cook in a Smeg pizza stone. And I mean, the thing is it's really true fast food. If you have to put your stone in the oven and wait for an hour and then put your pizza on and it still takes 20 minutes because it's cooled the stone down as soon as you put the pizza on it, that's not fast food. This is fast food. When you can cook pizza after pizza after pizza, I think my record is 18 pizzas in a morning, cooking in and out, in and out. It's true fast food, and you get a great result all the time, every time.
So can you use the stone for other foods?
Yeah, absolutely. You can use it for baking bread. Really good for bread baking, of course, too, because it's providing that heat from the bottom. Some people use it to soften the base heat. I don't think that's quite as necessary, because there are functions that you can use where you don't have the base heat. You can cook, if you're doing things like pita breads and things like that, really good for those. Now our pears have finished and are sealed, and what you can see, yeah, they've already started to change colour. They almost sort of look like they're cooked. They look almost sort of, they've gone from white to a sort of opaque colour. Now we're going to pop these in the steam oven, and we're going to steam them for 45 minutes. I'm going to, at the same time as I'm steaming them, but a bit later on, I'm going to put in some fish and some vegetables and some rice. And we can have all these things cooking at once in the steam oven. So in a minute we're going to start to talk about cooking in a steam oven.
I guess you could use that same sort of mix environment for meat prior to soup.
Yes, absolutely. Really good. Really good for marination, because it's adding that sort of infusion, and it's taking forcing the spices and things like that from the infusion into the surface of the meat. So excellent for that, for making soups. Also, even if you're fond of a tipple, doing things like infusing alcohol, fusing flavours into alcohol. So limoncello or things like that, where you are infusing, that would normally take weeks. But using the vacuum drawer, you can get it done, and combined with low temperature steaming in the steam oven, you can get done in a couple of hours. Really good for all those sorts of things. Preserved lemons, which also would take weeks. Combined with that chef's mode of infusion and a steam oven, you can have them immediately. You can have them ready immediately. So our pizza is nearly ready. I'm going to give it just another couple of minutes. While we are talking about it, I'm going to talk to you about the steam oven. So those pears, I'm going to cook them at 85 degrees. So this in itself is one of the huge benefits of a steam oven. If you wanted to try and steam food at below 100 degrees on the cooktop, you would be unable to do so, because steam requires 100 degrees to be created, so water needs to boil. Because this is all inside the oven, the boiling is done at 100 degrees, but the fan's temperature sensors can sense the temperature is rising above 100 degrees and turn cooling fans on and cool it down. So we can steam as low as 40 degrees. Now, with the Smeg oven, it doesn't have a reservoir as many do. What it does is you tell it how long you want to steam for, and it will calculate the amount of water that it needs to do that job. It is possible to fill it up before at the end of the day, but today all we want to cook for is the 45 minutes for these pears. So we're going to tell it that we want to steam at 85 degrees. So I'm going to go in here. By the way, this isn't just a steamer. So we can see our first three functions here. We've got steam, we've got hot air and steam, and we've got fan assisted, like we're cooking with a pizza, and steam, and then here we've got all our regular dry ingredients. So it's a normal oven as well. You don't have to cook with steam with this. We are just going to use steam. We're going to do it 45 minutes, and I'm going to tell it that we want to do it at 85 degrees. So 85 degrees, here we go. I tell it that, and it will calculate the amount of water that it needs to do that job, and it's telling me, fill me up, give me a drink. So I pull out this nozzle, pop the jug there, and it will suck up the amount of water that it needs to do this job. We're actually going to hijack it with the fish and the rice and the vegetables as well. But that's okay, it's all going to be done in 45 minutes, so it's actually all going to be ready at the same time. And that's a real benefit of a steam oven, is we can do all of these things at once without any compromise of flavour and odours. I'm just going to give this another 1 more minute. It does, yeah. It also comes with a lot of programs, so if you're unfamiliar with cooking with steam and you don't know how long something would take, you can go into the programs and say, I want to cook beans, and it will just take the amount of water to cook those beans. So very useful in that regard, but excellent way of being able to combine all sorts of foods being cooked at once. Now normally we would cook rice at 100 degrees, but because we're cooking these at 85, and because I'm cooking this snapper. Now snapper at 100 degrees, that's really a little bit hot for cooking snapper. If we steam it on the cooktop, it's actually a bit hot, and it's very easily will flake up, it won't hold its shape because that 100 degrees is too hot. So because we haven't got an issue with that in here, it's excellent for steaming your fish. So here is our pizza bread, and actually I should just show you the crust on the bottom is really great, it's really crispy. So you have a fantastic crispy crust. Now, if I'd done a thin crust, it would probably be ready in about 3 or 4 minutes. But today we do a nice fat, crusty pizza bread. So, talking about steam, what we need to start with is talking about what types of steam ovens there are, because there's more than one type of steam oven on the market. And when you're deciding whether you need a steam oven, it's really important to know what steam oven is going to be best for you, or whether a steam oven is going to be best for you. I'll leave this there for you to help yourself too.
Steam ovens becoming more popular?
They definitely are becoming more popular. I've been doing this job for 8 years now, and I would say probably about 40% more popular than they were 8 years ago. So more people are deciding on steam. Also more brands are bringing out steam ovens. It's becoming more of a commonplace thing. So I've told it it's full, and now it's just going to start. It's going to bring the temperature up to 85 degrees, and then it's going to automatically move to cooking when it gets to that 85 degrees. It won't start counting down the time until it gets up to temperature. So, types of steam oven that are on the market. There are 3 types of steam oven that you can buy. Smeg make 2 of the 3. The first is a steam-only oven. So it can do this. It can steam at 100 degrees or below. It doesn't have elements inside. All the cooking is done with the steam that's contained inside the appliance. It's great if you do a lot of steaming, but it's not as versatile, because if you want to use it as a secondary oven, you can't. The second type of steam oven is actually this oven here. This is known as a steam assist oven. So this is an oven that is a regular dry oven, but you can add a little bit of moisture into the cavity while you're cooking, which makes it really good for cooking bread and meat in particular. So when you're cooking meat, it's retaining all of the moisture inside. And you know that, I mentioned that Smeg have this thermoseal technology which keeps all of the moisture in anyway, so we're actually adding even more moisture in to really retain all the moisture that's in your meat. So you're going to get a much more tender result, but you're still going to get the browning because you're cooking with high temperature. And also bread. So if I was cooking a loaf of bread in the steam assist oven, that steam inside the oven cavity would have two purposes. One is it would keep the surface of the dough moist as it was doing its final rise, which is called the oven spring. So you would get better rise out of your dough, because if you think about it, if it dries out, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for that dough to keep rising underneath. So it keeps the surface of that moist while it's having that final rise, but also the moisture changes the structure of the gluten and the dough itself and provides a later forming, thinner, crispier crust. So you get that real artisan-like crispy crust.
Even with the steam and moisture, you're still going to get
Yeah, so a lot of people think moisture, it's the antithesis of what you would normally think. The steam actually creates that crispy crust. It's excellent when adding when you're cooking pastry as well, because you're getting a lovely crisp result. You also get almost 1.5 times the rise out of a puff pastry, because puff pastry rises because of the steam that is created between the layers, so you're assisting in that as well, but you're still getting the browning from the heat. So that's the second type, is the steam assist oven. Now, this doesn't create enough steam inside it to cook with just steam. What you need for that purpose is this type of oven, which is called a steam combination oven. So it basically has 3 roles. It can be a dry oven, so I could cook a pavlova in this oven if I wanted to, cook meringues in it using the dry oven functions. I could cook with just steam, so where steam is doing the cooking as I'm doing now, and it can also do the steam assist cooking. So this is the most versatile of the 3.
Pretty much getting 3 ovens.
And one. Yeah. And so what people are often thinking about when they're building their kitchen or replacing their appliances is, do I need a microwave or do I need a steam oven? A lot of people are trying to decide between the two, because often you're in a situation like you are over here, where you've got a 60 centimetre oven and then you've got a compact 45 centimetre oven above it, and you haven't got room for a third appliance. So a lot of people are thinking, do I need a microwave or do I need a steam oven? And so for that, what we talk to the customer individually and ask them, well, what do you use your microwave for? So what do you use your microwave for?
Predominantly defrosting and maybe a little bit of reheating.
Right, so defrosting and reheating are both much better done with steam than they are with microwave. So we know defrosting in a steam oven, we'll do it because it's convenient and fast, but it doesn't give a great result. And that's because of the nature of microwave. Microwave's actually targeting the water molecule inside the food and heating it, which is sort of cooking from the inside out. And so you get partially cooked areas and then partially raw and sometimes still frozen areas. Yeah. So in steam, it's gently heating the food from the outside in. It's not as fast. So to defrost, say, a 500 gram chicken breast in a microwave would take about 20 to 27 minutes, depending on your microwave. But generally, you're not going to get a perfect result. New microwave combination ovens do a better result. They have a better result than cheaper microwaves do. But in your steam oven, it's going to take about 45 to 55 minutes, depending on the thickness of the chicken. So it's not as fast, but you get a better result, and it's still pretty convenient. I do all my defrosting using a defrost mode or steam combination at a low temperature. So I'll pop my chicken into the oven at, say, 35 or 40 degrees with 3 levels of a high humidity. So that what happens is that moisture penetrates meat much quicker than dry air does. So by having the steam, it's penetrating much quicker, so speeding up the defrosting than it would if you put it in a dry oven. The other thing that you mentioned was reheating food. Reheating food in a microwave is great, super fast, but also not very great for the look of the food or the result. So because of the way microwaves work targeting the water molecule, they tend to dry out certain areas of the food and not heat other areas of the food. And so you need to stir what you're reheating in order for it to be even, and then it doesn't look that great. In a steam oven, it's not as fast as that. So it might take 10 to 12 minutes to reheat a plate of food, but actually you can do multiple plates of food and it's still going to take 10 to 12 minutes. It's going to be even, it's going to retain the moisture inside the food, so the moisture isn't going to evaporate out of the food. It's going to be even, and it's going to look exactly as it did when you plated it up to put it in the oven. So much better for those purposes. Anything else you use your microwave for at home that you can think?
Just melting butter.
Yeah, so there's a few things. So there's a lot of things that steam ovens do better that microwaves are used for. Things like a lot of people use them for steaming their vegetables. Of course, they're not really steaming their vegetables. They're using a little bit of water in there to create some steam, but the microwave is targeting the food as well. And they do a good job of that. But steam oven's obviously going to be better for that. But there are other things that a microwave is definitely better at than a steam oven. So yes, you could melt your butter in a steam oven. You'd have to cover it and pop it in. It's going to take quite a while, and it's really not that practical for its use. I would personally use the cooktop to melt my butter if I didn't have a microwave. The other thing is popping popcorn. A steam oven is never going to pop instant popcorn like a microwave can. So it's thinking about reheating a cup of coffee is another thing. Yes, conceivably you could reheat it in a steam oven, but it's not practical and you wouldn't do it. So I just make a new cup of coffee. So it's a matter of deciding whether you think a steam oven is going to replace the microwave for you, then it does. You know, if you mainly use it for defrosting and reheating, then a steam oven's going to do a better job of that. But if you pop popcorn and melt butter on a daily basis, then maybe you still need a microwave, but perhaps you can get by with a microwave in a cupboard, you know, $100 microwave in a cupboard somewhere, and not lending all that kitchen real estate to an appliance that's for melting butter and popping popcorn. It's a matter of thinking about what's right for you. Of course, cooking with steam is retaining so much more of the nutritional value of the food as well. So if we were steaming on the cooktop and we had our vegetables or our fish and we were steaming it here, we'd need to be doing it over a double boiler or, you know, a steaming basket, something that's porous so that the steam can get up into the food. Of course, if it's porous, the steam can get up into the food, but also the juices from the food can leach out and do leach out into the water, that's the boiling water, which goes down the drain. When we're steaming in a steam oven, we usually steam vegetables, fish, things like that on a perforated tray again, so the steam can get to the food from all angles, but we can put a solid tray underneath that perforated tray, and that's going to capture the drips that of the juices, and we can pour them back over the food. We're not losing them. Also retains a lot more of the vitamins. So because we can steam at particularly low temperature levels, we retain a lot more of the nutritional value of the food. The juices that drip out of your food, out of your vegetables, out of your fish, out of anything that you steam, that's the nutritional value of the food that's come from inside the cell. So you're losing that when you pour it down the drain. So yeah, a much more nutritious and healthy way of cooking. You can still overcook. People often say you can't overcook vegetables in a steam oven. Speaking of which, I'm going to pop our rice into the steam oven now. So this is going to take the next longest. So normally I would steam my rice at 100 degrees for about 20 minutes. So I'm going to pop this in. It's going to take a little bit longer than it would normally. This is basmati rice. It's 1 to 1.5. So I've got 1 cup of rice to 1.5 cups of water in here. And you can see that I'm popping it in a glass tray. I could put it in a metal tray, or I could put it in the dish that I'm serving it in, as long as it's boil proof basically. Another one of the benefits of a steam oven is that you're not so restricted to what you can cook in. So you can cook in a serving dish to save yourself washing up. If your serving dish is dishwasher proof, you can pretty much guarantee that you can use it in the steam oven. So I'm just popping this in here, and I'm going to let it do its job inside the steam oven. So as you can see, when I open the door, I do get a release of steam, and it can seem quite impressive sometimes how much steam comes out of the oven, but it's a lot less steam than boiling a pot continuously for 45 minutes. Yeah. So the method that I'm using for the pears is taken from a cooking method called sous vide. So sous vide means under vacuum. That's what it means, and of course we vacuumed it. Sous vide cooking traditionally needs to be under vacuum because the method it used to be a restaurant only type of cooking really, but it's becoming more and more home cook available. But we needed previously to have a big water bath that would heat the water up to a specific temperature and maintain it at exactly that temperature for a long period of time to cook the food. And we needed the vacuum sealer. It needed to be under vacuum because if we put it even in obviously it needs to be waterproof because you're putting it into this water, but if there was air in the bag, it would float to the top so it wouldn't be submerged. So that's why it needed to be under vacuum before. But you can see we're sous vide cooking these pears in here. They don't need to be in a vacuum chamber. Now I've used the vacuum because for the express purpose of infusing those pears. But if I wanted to just poach some pears or cook some pears, I could just pop them in there. Right? They don't need to be in a vacuum sealed bag. They can just go straight in because they're not floating, they're in air. They're effectively being sous vide by steam and not by water. So it's a much more convenient method for sous vide cooking as well.
Does it matter what shelf you put food in the oven?
When you're cooking with steam, not really. So when I say not really, there are a couple of caveats to that. So if you have two trays and they're very close together, and you're cooking rice, for example, which needs water to evaporate off it. So the rice has to absorb the water, but also some moisture is evaporated off it. If you've got two trays very close together like that, the rice is going to take a lot longer to cook. So in general, no, absolutely not. Doesn't need any longer at all to, or it doesn't, you can be anywhere because the steam is everywhere inside the oven. But just thinking about where you put things. And also if you've got a perforated tray, you know, you can use that for your benefit or not. So if you've got some fish or salmon or something like that in a perforated tray and you've got a solid tray underneath it, you can put your rice on the solid tray and then the juices from the salmon can flavour your rice. But you wouldn't want to put your sticky date puddings underneath your salmon while it was dripping down. So just thinking about where you put things, is really using it for your benefit or otherwise is a really useful thing. Now,
do you get transfer of flavours you talked about?
No. So this is one of the huge benefits with steam. Is one of the demonstrations that I often do might be cooking a creme brulee with a fish curry. Now you put those two together and you think, well, I don't want a creme brulee that's curry flavoured. Thanks very much. The steam encapsulates the odours and the flavours within the food. So you don't get your curry flavoured. You get your curry flavoured curry and you get your creme brulee flavoured creme brulee. They are cooked together in the same oven, but the steam will encapsulate those odours and flavours within the individual foods. So there's no transference there. So if we look at the oven here, you can see, you can't see in it that well because it's completely cooking with steam. So there's no element actually operating inside this oven at all. It's only steam that's been created. And with a Smeg oven, the steam is actually created inside the oven. So there's two main methods that steam ovens use to create steam. Some ovens have a boiler that's external to the oven cavity, so it might be in the back or at the top, and the water goes to the boiler creates the steam and it injects steam into the oven cavity. A lot of the steam ovens use that method. Smeg use a different method. So their method is that the water is sucked in, it's held in a temporary reservoir, and it's delivered to a little bowl that's in the bottom of the oven. So it's got this little metal recess in the bottom of the oven, which has elements around it. Those elements heat up and they boil the water, so the steam's actually created inside the oven. Now, personally, I think that the food cooked with steam created inside the oven has a better result than the food with steam that's injected into the oven. I can't give you any reason as to why that might be, but I've cooked particularly things that are delicate like eggs. When you cook them in an oven, Gaggenau also create their steam with the moisture inside the oven like this, you get a silkier, moister result than when cooked in an oven with injected steam. They're all at 100% humidity, so the science would say that there's no difference, but the results tell you otherwise. The other benefit of this is that, so with all ovens that create steam, there's going to be condensation, right? So water is going to collect somewhere. And most ovens that have injected steam, the water collects at the bottom of the oven. And at the end of the cook, you need to, depending on the oven brand, wipe it out with sometimes a tea towel, sometimes several sponges. Sometimes there can be quite a lot of moisture that collects in the bottom of the oven. Because this one has the bowl where the steam is created inside the bowl, there's really just a little bit of moisture left inside the bowl when you've finished cooking. 1 or 2 presses with the sponge and it's gone. It's literally a couple of tablespoons that are left inside. It's quite a good design for cleaning up afterwards. People often ask, does it have a drying function? Well, it doesn't have a drying function because it doesn't really need one. Whereas some of the other oven brands, they have a drying function because they really need a drying function. When this finishes cooking, it automatically turns on a little element at the base of the oven that will just dry out any residual moisture that is in the base and around the sides of it. There really isn't that much.
Can you have a paralytic oven and a steam oven together?
Yeah, so that's the sad part about steam ovens. So there's always a downside, right? So everything that I've mentioned about cooking with steam is an upside, is a benefit. The one depressingly sad thing about steam ovens is that they can't be pyrolytic. Because they have to contain so much moisture inside them, they need a rubber seal. And pyrolytic ovens need to get up to nearly 500 degrees to basically carbonise the dirt or cremate the dirt and turn it to dust. And rubber and 500 degrees aren't a good match. So no, we can't have a pyrolytic steam combination oven. We can, though, have a pyrolytic steam assist oven because these, I must turn this oven off, because steam assist ovens don't have to contain so much water. They're not cooking with just steam. So your steam assist oven can be pyrolytic. So this is a great thing to think about when you're cooking. If you're going to want to be cooking a lot of meats and foods that are going to create a lot of splatter inside your oven, maybe have a steam assist pyrolytic oven to do your dirty cooking in and a steam combi to do your cleaner cooking in. They all come with steam cleaning functions. All steam ovens come with steam cleaning functions. So they do have that, which will assist with helping dissolve any dirt around the oven and let it drip off down to the bottom, and then you can wipe it out. But it's not magic like pyrolytic is like a magic. And once you've had a pyrolytic oven, it's really hard to go back to a non-pyrolytic oven. Right, let's go and check and have a look at I'll just grab a spoon and have a look at our ice cream and see how we are going.
How long's it been in now?
It's been in, I must have been talking for about half an hour now. Oh, actually, we're ready. So I am going to tell it to stop its super freeze now and let it just be a regular freezer. So I'm going to turn it off.
Was that recipe I saw at the beginning, that was it an egg-based?
No, so this is a very easy no churn ice cream. So most custard-based ice creams with eggs in them require churning to stop the ice crystals forming and being crystal. This is a no churn recipe. So basically it's as simple as 500 mils of cream whipped up and a can of sweetened condensed milk folded into it and some vanilla. Really simple and really easy. So if you've got guests coming for dinner, it's just super fast to be able to get this done. So let me just go here and we're going to go and go. I don't want that. So how long have we got to go here? So we've got 30 minutes to go here. When there's 10 minutes to go, I'm going to pop my fish in, and my bok choy is going to go in there just a few minutes after that. This here, 10 minutes is going to be ample cooking time. I've got quite thick fish fillets here. If they were thin fish fillets, probably only put them in for about 6 or 7 minutes. And the bok choy is going to take about 5 minutes to cook.
Still at your 85 degrees.
Still at my 85 degrees. This could go in at 100 degrees, but because we're cooking at 85, I'm going to put it in a little bit earlier than I would, because 2 or 3 minutes for bok choy is usually enough. Things like asparagus as well, 3 or 4 minutes for thin asparagus, for beans and things like that. But because we're doing it at a lower temperature, we're just going to pop it in for a little bit longer.
So do you need to put any seasonings or oil or butter or anything?
No, so you don't need to. I am in this instance, because this is a...
On the vegetables?
Oh, on the vegetables? No, I've got nothing. Nothing on the vegetables at all. And that's pretty much how I like to cook my vegetables, particularly for people who haven't tried their vegetables with steam before. Because it really... You don't realise how much flavour you're losing when you boil your vegetables or cook them in another way. So it's really good not to season the food and get people to try the food as it really should be cooked. It's amazing. Now I could steam the fish also with no seasoning here, but this is a sort of a take on a Chinese style of cooking fish. So it's sitting in a bit of light soy sauce with some ginger and some chilli and some spring onions. And what's going to happen is the juices from the fish are going to add to that liquid already and create a really nice sauce. You could do this also with a whole fish if you want to. Now, one of the things that a lot of our Chinese customers really like to do is steam a whole fish. But if you're doing it on a cooktop, it's almost impossible unless it's A, a very small fish, or B, you've got some huge vessel to do it in, because your head's going to hang out one side and your tail's going to hang out the other. And that means that they have to cut the fish in half. Now, when you cut your fish in half, A, it doesn't look good, and B, as soon as you cut it, it's losing its juices out. So part of the benefit of cooking a fish whole is it's retaining everything inside. In a steam oven, we could do 2 or 3 whole fish at once. So real benefit if you're doing entertaining, if you entertain a lot. It's great, for instance, dumplings. If you cook dumplings on the cooktop, and my daughter loves dumplings, for example, and she said, oh, why don't you cook me any dumplings? You cook them at work all the time. I said, I know, but I do them on the cooktop. I can only steam about 6 or 7 at a time, and you've eaten them. And then I have to stand there again and steam another 6 or 7, and then you've eaten them. But in a steam oven, I can do 100 at a time if I want to. So I've got guests over, excellent for being able to cook in volume, particularly those sorts of convenience foods like dumplings and steam buns. I like to make my own, and it means you can just make them up in advance, keep them in the freezer, and then just bring them out when you want to without...
So would they take this, if you're having 3 trays of dumplings, would it take the same amount of time as 1 tray?
Yep. Yeah, so it's so cooking with steam is very similar to cooking in an oven, as opposed to cooking in a microwave, slightly different. So when you're cooking with microwave, it's the volume of food that determines the time that it's going to take. When you're cooking in an oven or with steam, it's the density of the food. So if you've got a fish this big, it's going to take longer than a fish this big. But if you've got 3 fish this big, it's still going to take the same length of time as 1 fish this big. So it'll be exactly the same length of time. So maybe 18 minutes for your dumplings from frozen, steamed. Really, really convenient.
And I guess you don't have to stand over them either. You can pretty much set and forget.
Absolutely. So you can walk away. And so when you're entertaining, pop them in, let it go. It's going to beep when it's finished. And you can be off with your guests entertaining and then come and...
Obviously, you can set timers.
Yes, so it's just like a regular oven, so you can set an advance time. So say you've got your guests coming at 7 o'clock and you want to have your dumplings and your steam buns ready when they arrive, but you want to go and get ready, you can say, I want you to cook for 18 minutes, I want you to be ready at 7 o'clock, turn it on, sucks up the water that it needs, and it stands there and stand by, and then you can go off and get ready.
Do you use the steam oven to sterilise
That's
jars?
That's one of the great things about it. So one of the things that I like to, one of the recipes that I use is making lemon curd using the steam oven, and it's a really simple, gentle way of cooking lemon curd. And I just pop it in, and then I pop in my jars when there's about 15 or 16 minutes to go. Pop the jars in, and that sterilises the jars, and I don't have to be boiling the jars and things like that. Babies' bottles. Things like that. If you wanted to be really provide a fine dining experience for your guests, you could have some nice hot towels for them when they arrive, because you could pop your hot towels in the oven and steam them, and so they've got some nice hot towels for the guests. So there's lots and lots of applications for a steam oven, as well as your standard things that you'd think of, like cooking as well. Right, let's see how we're going here. We've got 24 minutes, so it's just still a little bit early for me to put my fish in. So let me ask you a couple more questions about what sort of cooking you do, and so we can determine really what sort of appliances you are best for you. So what sort of cooking do you?
I probably do a lot of roasting. Family like roasted chickens, vegetable salads, that type of thing. Probably not so much the dumpling
Type? Yeah. So those sorts of foods are excellent cooked with added steam. So roast in particular. So if you think about the way that humidity works, so we're in a air-conditioned building here, and we need to keep the doors and windows shut because it's dry in here because of the air conditioning, but it's really humid outside. So what happens with nature is it's always seeking an equilibrium with anything, but with moisture in particular. So if it's humid outside and it's dry inside, and we have the doors and windows open, it will be constantly trying to equalise that moisture. So that same thing happens in your oven. So you have a moist piece of meat in your oven and dry air surrounding it. What nature will do, just because it's the way nature works, it will try and equalise that. So it'll extract the moisture from your meat into your oven, right? So it's drying out your meat as it cooks. And this is why a lot of people in the past used to do things like put a roasting dish of water in while they were cooking their roast. It's also one of the reasons that oven bags were invented, right? To contain the moisture. So oven bags really had two benefits. One was to keep a really moist result for the food. The other was to keep the oven clean. So they were actually a little bit of a failure at both. Now, they were really great at retaining the moisture inside the food, but if you get so much moisture around your food, very hard for the browning to happen. So when you'll notice if you've ever cooked a chicken in a roasting bag, it sort of looks a bit insipid. It's really moist, but it doesn't look that great, and actually flavour isn't that great either, because browning is flavour. So yeah, so you don't get that crunch as well. So what people did to counteract that was, towards the end of the cook, they'd open the bag. Well, of course, that let all the juices out and made the oven dirty. So they didn't really do a great job. But you can think of a steam assist oven as being like a giant oven bag, but the elements are inside the bag, and it's controlling the amount of moisture. So we're not getting too much, we're getting just enough to protect the meat, to stop that those juices being extracted too much from the meat. But also, because of Smeg's thermoseal technology that I mentioned before, which keeps all of the air and moisture in the oven, once a small amount's been extracted, it's not going anywhere else. So it's retained inside the oven, retaining it then inside your meat as well, but providing really good browning as well. So excellent roasting oven, the steam assist oven.
How am I going to get my crispy potatoes?
You can still get the crispy potatoes. So with the function that Smeg offers you, that I mentioned before, the turbo or supercook, which is fan forced heat, which is really good for cooking multiple layers, but it's not so great at quick browning because it's just hot air. It's a bit like trying to get a tan from a fan heater. It's not a fast process, right? you really need some sun to get the tan. And you can think of the sun as being the elements. So turbo is hot air circulating inside the oven, but it's also providing browning elements. So if we put our potatoes near the top of the oven, because moisture is heavier than air, so the most moist part of the oven is always going to be nearer the bottom of the oven. So we put our meat at the bottom of the oven, we put our potatoes at the top, so they are still getting the benefit of the hot air, but they're also getting the benefit of the sun from the top to create that crispy brown potatoes. And you can cook a little bit hotter in an oven that's capturing its moisture, because food isn't drying out, because it's retaining the moisture inside the food.
So can you cook your like pumpkin and that at the same time as the potatoes and your roast chicken?
Yes, you can. Potatoes are best up the top, and I like to put pumpkin and things like that in the middle, and then my meat at the bottom. The one key thing I will say, regardless of the oven that you buy, actually, it's really important not to crowd your vegetables, because vegetables have a lot of moisture in them, and you're in an oven that's a moist environment. So allowing a lot of room around your vegetables, not crowding them together, so that the moisture inside can evaporate off and then they can get the browning as well. If they're crowded together, they're not going to get browned down on the sides and things like that.
I guess if you've got the two ovens running as well, you could have, if you were doing, say, a slower roast, you could use your main oven and still your vegetables.
Absolutely, yeah, or either way. Either way round. It's absolutely, by having two appliances, you're not limited. So a lot of people want maybe a big 90 centimetre oven, and that's great if you've got the room for it, but remembering that you can only cook one function, one temperature at a time. With having two appliances, you can cook multiple functions at the same time, and by having two different types of appliances, you've got even more choice about what you're doing.
Can you stack them like a tower, or do you have to have them?
No, you can stack them like a tower. And so in my kitchen, I've got my 60 centimetre oven, and then above that I've got a 45 centimetre combination oven above it. And so they're both easy to access, so I've got them in the wall. If you've got them under bench, you'd probably want to go side by side. If you're going side by side, you'll need another small appliance, be it a vacuum drawer, ideally, or a warming drawer, or Smeg even make just a storage drawer, and that will balance, because these are 60 centimetres deep and these are only 45 centimetres deep. So these ones don't come in a 60 centimetre version, the steam combis with Smeg. Some brands do, but Smeg doesn't. Right, it's time for me to put my fish in now. So we're going to pop the fish in. I'm going to pop it on the bottom shelf, and in another few minutes I'm going to pop the bok choy in. Now if you want to have a quick walk around the showroom and have a look at the different appliances that are available, you can come back to me in 10 minutes and we'll have lunch.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Last thing to go in is our bok choy. Everything looks like it's almost ready to go now, so we've just got a couple of minutes for that bok choy to cook, and we'll be ready to dish it up and everything can come out together. That's really great for when you're entertaining. So particularly if you can time your foods, work out how long each food takes to cook, and then you can even put a timer on in your other oven to remind you when to put different foods in the oven. That's a really good tip for organisation. Have you got any other questions?
Are there any recipe ideas for like the steam oven?
Actually, yes, there are. So Kitchen Things has its own recipe website now, and there's about 100 recipes there. Most of them are steam oven recipes. There are recipes for microwave combi and for regular ovens as well, but it's recipes.kitchenthings.co.nz, and then you'll see all the recipes, and we're continually adding recipes. The cooking technology experts at Kitchen Things create the recipes, and we each test each other's recipes to make sure that they work, and we try them on a couple of different brands of ovens to make sure that they're going to work for every brand, because it's actually quite hard to find recipes for steam ovens, and that's because a recipe generally needs to be a little bit specific to each brand. Each brand has slightly different methodology and the way that you set it up, whether the countdown time starts from the moment you put the food in, or like Smeg and Mela and other brands, it starts counting down the timer at the end of the when it gets up to temperature.
Yeah, what was that website again?
recipes.kitchenthings.co.nz.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Does the oven, I know the recipes will be really helpful, but does the oven come with any programs? We're looking around and we saw some of the head presets programs.
Yes, Smeg does come with quite a few different presets in lots of different categories. So because the oven isn't just a steam oven, it has presets for regular dry cooked foods and steam assist cooked foods as well. There's quite a few. And so you go into the category and then select the food that you want to cook, and it will automatically cook using the time, temperature and function that the manufacturer determines the best. Now, the very best thing about Smeg ovens and their presets is that you can change them. So, yes, so some oven brands, the oven is the god. It decides what time and temperature, and if you don't like that result, then that's too bad. But with Smeg, if you've cooked a certain food, say you've cooked a pork roast using the function, and you think, well, that was really nice, but actually I would like it cooked a little bit longer, I would like it a bit more well done than this, you can go into that preset and you can add time or add temperature to suit yourself, and then it will remember that for future cooks. And also, because they're usually, particularly with meat recipes, they're weight determinant, so you put in the weight of your food and then that calculates the cooking time from that. If the next time you were cooking a piece of meat that was significantly bigger or significantly smaller, it would adjust the time based on your preferences, not on the original preferences. So those are really good.
What if you've got your own thing that you want to cook and you've come up with your own?
Yeah, so there are 10 spaces for your own presets that you can set up. Now, a lot of people might say that they will use those presets for things they cook often, but actually I like to use them for things that I don't cook often, that I cook fairly regularly but not necessarily often, like my Christmas cake, for example. I can never remember from one year to next what was the exact time that the cake took to be perfect, and if I pop that in, then I know next year I just go and press Christmas cake and I know that I'm going to get that perfect result again. So that's really useful. There's our food is now ready. So I'm going to go and grab an oven mitt and get them out of the oven for us. So you can see that, I don't know whether you can see from that distance, but actually the oven is quite dry near the bottom of the oven, and that's because as soon as it's finished, it's turning on a little element to dry out the base, and there'll be a couple of tablespoons left in that recessed bowl. So there's our fish, and so how healthy does that look? Really beautiful, juicy, healthy. Yeah, retaining the colours of all the vegetables. And there's our rice. Perfect, fluffy rice every time. You're never going to get those, I don't know whether it happens to you, but if you cook rice in a saucepan, you often end up with a pattern of rice on the bottom of your saucepan where it's overcooked on the base. You never have that again. Perfect rice every time with a steam oven. And beautiful, bright green bok choy. Perfectly cooked. Let's grab our pears out as well. So you can see we're beautiful pears. They're not too soft and mushy like they might have been if I'd been poaching them on the cooktop. And if I didn't want to use these today, I can now just pop them in the fridge. So really great, and then I could use them tomorrow or the next day. I can have food ready in advance when I've got guests coming over. I like to only do 2 pears per bag, so if I had 10 people, I could cook 5 bags at once. Excellent. I'll go and dish this up.
So if you're cooking brown rice, would
Yep.
this
So
you,
no, it would be a little bit more liquid and a little bit longer.
you could put one bowl white rice, one
Yeah,
bowl
absolutely. Or you could have a mixture of
Fussy.
both if you wanted. Also, things like quinoa, bulgur wheat, buckwheat, you can use the steam oven to cook those as well. Put our rice down. And so I had the fish sitting on some ginger, so that ginger will have infused through the juices. That's created the sauce and also into the fish.
So healthy.
Yeah. Let's get some sticky soy just to go on our bok choy. Come and help yourself.
Thank you.